Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Killian Fjellbakk, co-founder of Zario. Zario is helping people reduce and replace unwanted screen time using artificial intelligence, psychology, and gamification. Killian, I'm so excited to chat with you and get to know you a little bit more as a founder, but also what you're working on at Zario. One thing I didn't mention before this was, I actually spent some time doing a volunteership for a suicide/crisis hotline. It was called Crisis Text Line. I'm not sure if you know of it, but we've been in the social workspace and kind of helping. And I'm always excited about new technology that are building out kind of ways that we can kind of help ourselves before things get to a point or critical mass. And before we get into everything you're doing at Zario and your mission and all the technology behind it, what were you doing before you started the company?
Before I started the company, I had my other company, which was the animation companies. We marketing content, animated videos for cryptocurrency companies, financial currencies, or even like large companies like Coke. And before that, I was kind of a consultant in a small company that created something called learning expeditions for top executives in Fortune 500 companies.
Wow. And so within it kind of marries itself. It sounds like, doing the consultancy and also the digital assets that I'm sure, are there to attract attention and elicit some emotion. What got you into the content creation or the animation piece? I mean, you came from a consultancy background. Did you always kind of mess around with animation on the side, or is this something that was kind of a happenstance?
So I think it ties into I really like creating experiences. Actually, I think life is kind of a series of multiple experiences. So I myself seek out really crazy experiences all the time. And that's why I went to study what I studied. And after that, during my studies, I played in a Chinese advertisement, like a 15-minute long Chinese advertisement about kind of lifestyle stuff. They needed a bad guy. And so they were like, "Hey, Killian, do you want to be the bad guy in our Chinese movie?" And I was like, "Yes." And then a few years later, after having worked in that consultancy, I hit up my friend that was doing that thing 4 years prior.
Yeah.
And we were just having a lot of beers and having a nice experience. And then he asked me if I wanted to join him to create a kind of marketing/animation company. And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." It was COVID. People, were inside. And so that's what we did for some time.
That's incredible. What ended up happening with that company? Did you end up selling it, or did you kind of move on to work on this project? What is your relationship now?
Yeah, so it still kind of exists. We don't really do any projects because I found out that it wasn't exciting to always have to run behind clients, you finish a project, you feel really good, but it's not scalable and you're not really solving any the true problem that people have. It's just about advertising or bringing up a new feature. So for me, it was interesting to create more of a product that could be scaled, that could help a lot more people. So ultimately we were like, okay, let's stop chasing all these clients and move on to something else.
Yeah. And what made you move on to Zario and start building something in the mental health and well-being space?
So it was with my current co-founder, Andre. We had met many years prior, but I knew that the way that we worked together or just as friends was very compatible. We're extremely different people, on a very different spectrum in terms of how we think and how we do stuff. And that's ultimately what I was looking for. Someone that was my opposite, basically. It's because I know for me, that helps you kind of think differently, more strategically, and all of those places where I kind of lack experience. He had a lot of experience. And so he called me one day. And then it was right after he had a meeting with his boss and a client over Zoom like this. And after that, his boss was like, "Hey, you can't be on Tinder while you're having client meetings." And he didn't even realize. And he's like, "How did she even know that this was happening?" And that's when he realized he had a severe problem, a severe social media addiction. And he came to me and he's like, "Hey, this is a crazy problem. Let's see if I can build a product around this kind of growing problem that more and more people are having." And we found out 130% growth in kind of the app store in terms of well-being space. And so it just became more and more evident that we had to do something exciting around in that space. So that's how I started.
It's fascinating how, whether, regardless of the app, I mean, even myself, there's always certain things I return to based on either my interest or, based on my motivation or even mood and feeling. If there are any statistics that you have in terms of, common apps that people will frequent, I think maybe Instagram, TikTok, like those are maybe becoming a little bit more popular nowadays. But is there anything that you see statistically where people return to and actually spend a majority of their time on?
I mean, the stats are pretty clear. I think but it's always shifting. That's the thing. I mean, some people spend hundreds and hundreds of pickups because essentially it's not actually what matters. It's not the amount of time that you spend, but it's actually the number of pickups. It's scientifically shown that like the amount of pickups you have, the more distracted you are because you don't really get into like this deep focus.
Yeah.
And so you just like hop around. And then it becomes kind of like a negative spiral where you start feeling bad if you overate a lot of like junk food, but your brain. So, and then you feel worse and then you do it more and you feel worse. But it's not necessarily just one specific app. We have people that see problems with like, they just obsess over news or like, when there was like down cycle in crypto, like some people would like wake up 2, 3, 4, 5 times during the night just to check their portfolio to make sure like, okay, I'm losing money, but I could sell, and like people freaking out. So it's all sorts of apps essentially. Like we don't want to be the one pointing fingers being like, this is bad, this is good. That's up to you and our users to say. So we just know that every month you'll have like hundreds of thousands of people that are actively looking for a solution. So we just want to be part of one of those solutions.
Yeah. Hey, it's crazy. I wouldn't have pinned it on pickups, but that makes a lot of sense. And, it's like having a constant distractor, right? And kind of always shifting your focus. And rather than, be in one situation, you have to switch your focus onto something else. Is there any number how many times like the average person picks up their phone or device?
It's about, it's like a little over 100 times a day.
Wow.
Depends. Wow. And then, and the number of screen time for Gen Z, it's actually over 7 hours time per day on watch. And then obviously as you go with the age, it decreases. But like one fact that I found quite like mind blowing was like, okay, you are actually 5 times more likely to have an accident if you're on your phone than if you're drunk, if you drink alcohol. So it's like, everyone's like, okay, don't drink and drive. But actually being on the phone, like distracted on your phone is like even more dangerous.
5 times more likely. That's crazy to think about. And now I'm just thinking about all the times that I'm on Spotify trying to change a playlist or something. Wow, that's crazy. And in regards to like mental health and, tracking of all this information, what information do we have at our disposal to be able to understand not only the frequency that we look at our phone, but its overall impact? Is it a lot of correlational data, or is it fairly clear what it means to pick up your phone and then how that kind of affects you negatively in terms of the down cycle? And what are I don't know if there's any scary statistics in terms of the long-term effects of, being kind of in this continuous practice of picking up your phone, distracting yourself, or having this negative emotion loop. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a very wide and very subjective thing because everyone reacts differently to different behavior and how they, go about, and also like their level of stoicism or stoic. I think what was very interesting was recently you had the leak, like they're called like the Facebook papers that were basically saying that Facebook knew all along that their platforms were like negatively hurting younger girls actually. So that's been statistically proven. But I think there's multiple things that also have an effect, right? Like the light in terms of like your sleep quality, like if you spend too many hours during the night, then it cycles into bad sleep pattern. There's a lot of things, but the data or the research is so new that it's hard to really draw any like aggregate conclusion on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Regards to, building a mental health application, what are some of the, I guess, barriers to entry in working within that space? I'm assuming, it's less barriers than say, building a Candy Crush application where you're just constantly, playing an arcade game. What are some of the, barriers like I mentioned that you have to kind of consider or actually go through to have a legitimate application that is for mental health, for health and well? Is there any certificate? Is there any loop, or is there any red tape that you have to go through? What was that process like, building an app and then launching it and have people using it?
So I would say like a mental health app, it depends kind of how you categorize yourself. But I would say it's like way harder than something like Candy Crush, but like less than, for instance, a bank. Because people care a lot about their data, right? So for us, it's very important that our data is fully secure, fully privatized. And you see like the level of interest into the privacy regulations and the privacy storage of personal data that we do in certain countries. They care a lot less than in other countries. And it's really fascinating to see, because we actually see who goes in and sees and reads a different privacy policy. But because we are in Europe, and because like Switzerland is even more advanced than most of the other countries, like we need to make sure that's like always our first and highest, most priority, right?
Yeah.
So I would say data, or maybe Asian privacy, is like ultimately the place where I think anyone should be extremely careful and take the utmost precautions that they can, because it could have bigger implications further down the line that we don't have the technology or things to be able to see right now. And that's what's a lot of fear into people, right? Things like when you watch like Black Mirror and you'll be able to trace back everything with all these like social credit score systems. So I think ultimately that's the very sensitive data. And some people are more aware of it now than others, but I think it's going to become more and more important and highlighted in people to be able to protect their privacy and data properly.
Yeah. How do you kind of juggle what is necessary data to, extract kind of, I guess, research information from, versus what data is maybe, you don't feel comfortable touching? Because I feel like, a lot of the Facebook implications were that they knew this information, but it's like the negligence in acting or doing something positive with the information. But then on the flip side, having too much information and building too many things around it maybe reinforces behavior or anything like that. How do you kind of manage the balance on what information I can use? What can I build off of that information? And how does that information overall affect my user?
So I think Apple is actually I'm a huge fan of Apple. I even have the vintage,
Oh, nice. Yeah, big difference
from Steve Jobs. But what they're doing really good is actually making sure that all the data that you collect or that they collect it's completely anonymous. So in that sense, it's like, it's good, but it's also a little bit bad, because we need to say when you download, for instance, Zario now, even though it's like far from the full-fledged application that we want it to be, you need to agree to certain conditions that aren't even true. It says things like that we're capturing data that we're not even doing, that we have to tell our users that we're doing that, even though we're not doing it. So there's like a lot of redundant information or acceptance. So I think with the newest regulations that they've had after the iOS 12 or 13, when they started having the opt-in thing that basically like made it a big problem for Facebook, it also had some negative consequences for other app builders. Capturing too much data is really hard. I think like you can get a lot of information, but what's really important is to anonymize it so that it doesn't like link back specifically to one person. So no one in Zario anywhere else could potentially go in and be like, oh, I can identify this user. So ultimately it's all encrypted through, other platforms already before we even touch it. We just need to make sure that we give it back to the user in a way that they can understand it and that they can use it for their own benefit and learn from it and then change their behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. What has it been like? What has been the process of transitioning into kind of a full co-founder relationship? I know you were working more on a service company, and now you're kind of diving, what's the thing that they say? It's like, some people go a mile wide and an inch deep, and then others can go, an inch wide and a mile deep. And it sounds like you're doing the latter now and really diving into a deep problem and working on solutions. What's been that transition like? What are some things that you've learned about your own skill set and challenges that you've faced, and how that, how have you improved kind of through this process?
Yeah, I like this question a lot. I see it also this like like a well, like you can have the same amount of water in a really deep and narrow well or in a
Yeah.
very shallow lake.
Yeah.
For me, I think I was a very shallow lake before. And what I've had to do is to really like dig super deep into like very specific tools. It become extremely technical because ultimately it all lies in my and my co-founder's hands. Is like,
Yeah.
okay, what is the output? So like the speed at which you can learn, I think is ultimately what's going to keep you afloat, because you can't rely on other people all the time. Or we've been, we don't have a technical co-founder. So now I had to teach myself a lot of the different codes, or even using certain no code platforms, or how to set up different API calls with Firebase, all of these kind of technical things that I didn't have any clue of, but was something that I really needed to and still need to teach myself ultimately.
Yeah.
Like the speed at which you can learn, I think that's really important. It's something that I've cherished and taken more and more into account. So right now I'm like teaching myself like 3-4 different tools at the same time, because I know that's going to get me closer to my end goal of being able to change something in the application in like less than an hour. I just wanted to be able to rapidly iterate and prototype so that we can have better product market fit and people and create more values for others. So
yeah. It's awesome to see, and echoing a lot of things other founders and their other experiences, which is just the necessity to learn quickly and learn anything that's, absolutely necessary for the product to move forward. And you only have what you have in front of you, the tools that you have at your disposal. So, oftentimes you don't have the luxury to necessarily grab at other resources, but so incredible to see how not only gritty, but, adaptable. I mean, there's so many words you can use to kind of identify the founder and the archetype that comes with it. Shifting focus onto Zario, where's the app now? How many people are using it? What's been the continuous growth kind of month over month? And then what are you excited about in the near future?
So we've been extremely like product focused. So we haven't done any like marketing, so to speak. Like the only thing that we did was product hunt. Like when we first launched the product, we went on product hunt, was a great success. We became like number 1 app of the day and number 5 of the week. So that was like the first start. But after that, like we were like, okay, we have some kind of like valid product. And so that kind of grew us organically to where we're now. But it's essentially what we've been working on constantly is just testing new features without implementing them into the app. So the latest feature that we have tested now for Android, which is actually our biggest market, is something that we call the circuit breaker. We're using a kind of new API tool so that where you can set up, because like I mentioned before, the number of pickups is actually more a factor that shows if you have a problem or not. So what we're doing now, we have a feature that then opens and goes above your other application, and then asks you if you like consciously want to open the app, and then tells you how many times you open the app. And then, we gamify that so that if you go above your own goal, then you break it and things like this. So that's what I'm ultimately really excited for.
Yeah.
So that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Then we're going to be tackling it for iOS afterwards.
Yeah.
With their brand new screen time API. So that's going to be excited. I've been waiting for that one.
That's incredible to think about, the mechanics and the psychology behind, it's like giving people the information and allowing them the choice versus, like I mentioned earlier, the limitations that I think a lot of companies fall short on it, which is limiting the user or creating it in a way that's more education focused, but not necessarily action based. Does not necessarily an action requirement. How do you kind of work through the process of gamifying the different activities we have? Do you kind of go through, do you get user feedback and go through a journey with them, or do you kind of have already an idea that you want to push out in terms of, the behaviors that you can track and then the response that the app will have, based on that behavior? What's your process in regards to building?
So ultimately, I think a lot of the really interesting features already exist in different shapes and forms. Earlier this year in March, I went to see a talk by Severin Hacker. He's one of the co-founders of Duolingo. Duolingo is a big inspiration for us because what they do is language learning, which is very, good. And also they gamify it. And he was asked, what would be kind of the new frontier? Where could gamification like really benefit? And you said like health and mental health applications.
Yeah.
And so for us our goal now will be to implement some of the features that you see, for instance, in Duolingo, but also in other apps where, for instance, like a buddy system works really well. We've done tests with collaborative challenges. Essentially, you team up with one other person or maybe 4 other people, sometimes strangers, and then you're dependent on each other to kind of get the points and get the goals. And that creates a lot of accountability, which people really seem to like. So we had like 90% retention rates, 10 days of the test trials. So you can imagine it as being like a mix between like Alcoholics Anonymous, a football team, and an escape game into one kind of virtual setting. But that's what we're going to be implementing in soon. And I'm also stoked to see that because we've done a lot of tests on it. So
yeah, I love that's such an interesting way to describe what you're building, and I'm excited to see myself. I'm downloading the app and going to play around with it. I always like to make a point to do so, but kind of shifting focus here. What are some of the biggest challenges that Zario faces today?
Tech, honestly.
Yeah,
so I know that a lot of your audiences are developers. So if we have any React Native developers listening to this, please send me the emails. I think we've had a lot of struggles finding people that have a lot of experience and that can do things that hasn't been done before. That's really what we're looking for, because there's very little documentation on certain things that we're working on, and having the people with the right skill at the right time.
Yeah.
Not necessarily at the right place. We don't really care where people are, right? That's the idea of being virtual. But also the right mindset. We need someone that is, curious and like I said before, like learn it all kind of attitude rather than know it all.
Yeah.
That's really key. Like we've had difficulties with developers that are like, oh no, that's not possible. And then we found out that it was possible later. And then it's just like, oh no, but actually I just didn't want to do that.
It's so funny. A lot of founders talk about the challenge of hiring and retaining, and also just finding the person that kind of meshes well with either the philosophy, the values, but overall the focus of the company as well, and the motivation behind it. What are some things that you've learned kind of through the hiring process in terms of, finding the right person and identifying the qualities that will be successful, or are you still in the learning process?
I think it's a continuous learning process, but we've seen a very different outcome from very different people. And it also is very related to us. Like how much can we, motivate people? How much can we hold the hand of a lot of people? But a lot of the time it's almost impossible because we don't always have the answers. We don't really know. So we've hired a lot of interns, for instance, and for them, obviously they require a lot more hand holding. But then in other cases, we've had people that knew more than us and were able to help us extensively. So I think it's like a continuous learning process.
Yeah.
And it will probably continuously evolve forever. But I think having as we're growing into more and more people, having more kind of documentation and also meeting up and face to face, I think also changes the relationship that you have with people. They see you more as another person, and
Sure.
I think that's quite important as well. Finding ways to interact outside of work, I think changes the dynamic and the culture of it.
Yeah. A lot of the founders say that it's creates a cohesion behind it, the relationship, which is, necessary, especially when you need to move fast and you need to break things and you need to be almost fearless, in whatever you're building, because I feel like a lot of people get into, overthinking if it's the right or wrong thing versus just moving it forward. I guess, long-term wise, if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Zario?
I think it's really going to be about gamifying life, essentially figuring out a way to earn points and do stuff in just everyday life. I invented a game with my family where we were on vacation once called the Points Game, and it was all about coming up with several different social challenges. It could be hey, talk to the stranger or do this thing. So you would love to make Zario become in a way that feel an external, in addition to your like inner drive or your inner motivation, intrinsic motivation, that you have like an extrinsic factor that brings in ways that you want to evolve. So basically a self-help app that gives you points for doing things in real life. That's ultimately where we want it to go.
That's an incredible kind of drive and mission, especially in how it could benefit people who maybe have some kind of intrinsic, motivation or, inclination to want to do something, but maybe don't feel necessarily the support. It's like, the negative potential of things not going the way that they hope to overpowers their, even motivation to move forward. So it's like, it's adding a little extra to that. And it's super cool. I would hate to play that with my family because I feel like it'd get out of hand, but it sounds like it was a fun experience for you. I always like to ask this question to founders who are, currently in the midst of building and kind of iterating and learning. What's the hardest part of your job?
Focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100% focus. I think like I've also in later years realized that I might have some tendency of like ADHD or something, like shifting focus a lot. So like doing everything I can, like not just while I'm here at my desk, but like also like cutting down on like beer drinking with my friends, like making sure that I do enough exercise and like exercise and sleep so that like my performance and endurance at work is as high as it can get. I think like that's really been a challenge and something that I realize more and more. It's just like being able to focus, like just doing like one thing at a time and like sitting at it for a long time instead of just like next thing or like email or like lifting abs all the time, blah, 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 and you end up not doing anything and everything at the same time. And so like just sitting and doing something from start till end, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Especially as a founder who's, managing a lot of different, aspects of the business to go from, beginning to end and completion. It's hard. Yeah. It's a challenge that a lot of founders say, have. Do you have any tricks or tips that you use?
Tremendous amount of stuff. I used to have it so bad that I would like even tape, like my wife will make fun of me, but I used to like tape like these like
blinders,
shit, like blinders, like a horse. Because I could, like, if I have other things around me, so I would like turn off the light. But in all seriousness, I think like what helped me a lot is time boxing. So like in my calendar, I set off like the specific times when I want to do. Also like waking up early. I used to like hate waking up early. I think I'm more of like a night owl, but like I feel waking up early makes me feel like pumped, like make me excited. And obviously like working out, huge endorphin boosts. And obviously there's what you eat. So for me, like eating a lot of carbohydrates, like slows me down a lot. Like I feel like bloated and full and like my mind as well. So like cutting down on carbs help tremendously. And then, making sure I get all the vitamins. I have like all these fish oils and multivitamins and I grew my own like lion's mane mushroom, which also helps a lot for like cognitive function. So there's a lot you can do, but I'm sure Andrew Huberman probably has a lot more to say than I do.
I love the different. It's funny because a lot of founders, I'll ask that question and in terms of what they use in tactics and, it's like almost another job to keep yourself, energetic enough to actually tackle, every task you need to do, the building process and also stay mentally healthy and, not reinforcing any negative habits. It's like a constant, cycle. I feel like it's like I said, it's another job that you have to incorporate into the other tasks that you're doing, but done well, I'm sure you've seen such positive benefits from that. I know we're close to the end of the show here, and I definitely want to ask this next question, not only for my audience, but for selfish research purposes. Whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Whoa. Okay. Should I go with people or book? So my grandma, she influenced me a lot. She's highly intelligent, very successful, also a little bit crazy. So like kind of tilted over the bit, but she used to be kind of like an ambassador and diplomat for Norway, traveling around the world. She wrote many books. I'm actually translating one of her books to English, so I'll be publishing it on Amazon. She has the same last name as me. You can Google it.
Love it.
Both. So many books. Right now I'm reading Shoe Dog. It's really good.
Never heard of that. Yeah. What was that about?
Shoe Dog is the Nike story about the founder of Nike, how he founded, how he did.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Very strong one. I think obviously you have all those typical founder books, Zero to One from Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Classic. But outside of those classic, I mean, I should have done this interview at home because I have a whole bookshelf with all my favorite books. In terms of fiction, my favorite book is called Shantaram. It's about an Australian convict that flees to India, to Mumbai. And they just released actually a Apple TV series about it. So no way, like a few weeks ago. Really cool.
Oh man, I'll have to check that out. Awesome. Killian, thank you so much for answering all the questions. I know we're at time here, but I'm so excited to see, obviously I'll be playing with Zario and submit any unsolicited feedback to you if I have any, but I'm kind of excited to, dive into the app. And I'm overall excited about the mental health space and how, we're not extracting away technology, but allowing ourselves to behave with technology in a way that's positive. So really excited to have you on the show. And last little bit is, where can we find you? Where can we be a part of that app? I would like to give my guests a second to give us your plugs. What are your LinkedIns? What are your Twitters? Where can we download the app and, start being a fan and a user of the application?
So you go to meetzario.com and there you can go to the app. I also really recommend to check out the digital well-being test. We developed a test with some psychologists where you can do with 13 questions and it tells you if you're kind of in the red zone or yellow zone, the green zone. For me personally, you can go on my LinkedIn. I'm kind of active on LinkedIn. It's the only, that's Killian Fjellbakk. And if you want to check out my bucket list of things that I want to do before I die, you can go on KillianFjellbakk.com.
I love that. I'll have to check that out and see if there's anything I can help check off. But amazing, Killian. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you and walking through your journey, but also the app and what you're building. And always excited to see where it goes. But I hope you enjoyed yourself and thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Julian. It's been a big pleasure.
Awesome.